This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. New York City and New York State have agreed to pay a total of $36 million to settle lawsuits on behalf of two men who were wrongly convicted and jailed for decades for assassinating Malcolm X in 1965. Last year, a judge tossed out convictions against Muhammad Aziz and the late Khalil Islam after finding serious miscarriages of justice. An investigation by the Manhattan DA's office and the Innocence Project found that prosecutors, the FBI, the New York Police Department omitted key evidence around Malcolm X's murder. Muhammad Aziz spent 2 decades in prison before being released on parole. He was interviewed by ABC earlier this year.
People knew while you were there that you were one of the men convicted of killing Malcolm. Were there threats because of that?
To me? No.
Yes, sir.
No. The people know I didn't do it. Nobody ever thought I did it, just white people. Our people never thought I did it.
The other man exonerated was Khalil Islam. He died more than a decade ago, in 2009, but his family filed suit on his behalf. The settlement comes 2 years after Netflix released a documentary titled Who Killed Malcolm X, which raised new questions about the assassination. This is the trailer.
We're not brutalized because we're Muslims. We're brutalized because we are black people in America.
Power of this man's courage to say this stuff. It changed the entire trajectory of my life.
He was becoming a figure that transcended the Nation of Islam.
It was politics that really started the rift between Malcolm and the nation.
No, the white man is the greatest hate teacher that ever lived there.
The FBI was deathly afraid of someone like Malcolm X.
What kind of democracy is that?
People had to start wondering if something happens to Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm becomes the leader, it's over for all of us.
And just then the gunfire went off.
Malcolm's death never sat right with me.
The investigation was a failure.
Asking who's guilty is a dangerous question to ask.
What is the real story?
It's in the history book. Leave it there. Leave it alone.
Elijah Muhammad told everybody, do not raise a hand against Malcolm X.
He didn't have to give the order. Someone would take care of it.
The FBI should have known.
Why doesn't someone want to get to the bottom of this?
They never had any intentions of seriously investigating that assassination.
That is my mission. I'm not going to stop until I get justice. Because the official count of who killed Malcolm X, it's not true.
The trailer to the 2020 Netflix documentary series Who Killed Malcolm X. That last voice, Abdur-Rahman Muhammad, is joining us now. Independent scholar, historian, journalist, writer, and activist, widely regarded as one of the most respected authorities on the life and legacy of Malcolm X. We are also joined by David Shanies, civil rights and wrongful conviction attorney. He represented Muhammad Aziz and the family of Khalil Islam, who were exonerated this year and just settled for $36 million. David Shanies, let's begin with you. How did this negotiation take place? What was acknowledged?
Well, thanks for having me, Amy. First of all, the first settlement was with the state of New York. That happened a few months ago. The recent news was the settlement with the city of New York, which happened just last week. Fortunately, and this is the exception, not the norm, both of those entities wanted to come to the table immediately. They were both serious about trying to resolve these cases, and it was important to resolve them quickly. As you know, this case had a 50-year injustice that lingered and lingered and lingered. So for the government to resolve these cases immediately was essential.
And David, in terms of the size of the settlement, how was that reached by New York City? Because there was always, obviously, the questions about to what degree the New York City Police Department was aware of the assassination. Infamously, they had an undercover agent, Gene Roberts, who was part of the security detail. So to what degree did the responsibilities of New York City, not just in terms of the convictions of the men, but of the role of the New York City Police Department in Malcolm's death come into play?
A great question, because there are a lot of questions about who was responsible for this injustice. You have the FBI, of course, who hid a mountain of information that would have exonerated these men. But the New York City Police Department's hands were just as dirty. They had, as you said, an undercover police officer in the ballroom who witnessed the assassination, who could have corroborated the trial testimony of Mujahid Halim, who tried to exonerate these men, said they had nothing to do with it. I don't know these men. But the NYPD sat on that information for decades.
I want to go to another clip to introduce our next guest from the documentary Who Killed Malcolm X.
In the 1960s, the FBI launched one of the biggest counterintelligence operations in its entire history.
Black people everywhere today are fed up with the hypocrisy practiced by whites.
And they kept a very close watch on Brother Malcolm.
And if something isn't done, then I'm afraid that you will have a racial explosion, and a racial explosion is more deadly than an atomic explosion.
J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, was deathly afraid of someone like Malcolm X. Malcolm was being surveilled, he was being followed, his phone was tapped.
If you look at the investigation of Malcolm X, it's when he becomes a public figure for the Nation of Islam that the Bureau starts taking more of an interest into his subversive rhetoric.
You seem to be dissatisfied with everything. Just what do you want? I'm not dissatisfied with everything. I'm just telling you that the Negroes themselves should take whatever steps necessary to defend themselves.
The FBI had multiple high-ranking, paid human informants in the leadership of the Nation of Islam. Could it have been that FBI informants were actively involved in Malcolm's murder? Almost certainly so.
Some members of the Nation of Islam became willing tools, but they were the puppets. The puppeteers were in charge of that whole situation.
And in this next clip from the Netflix docuseries Who Killed Malcolm X, our guest, Abdur-Rahman Muhammad, describes footage of the scene outside the Audubon Ballroom after the 1965 assassination of Malcolm X.
The coroner ruled the cause of death to be the shotgun pellet. It wasn't the wounds from the shooters after the shot that killed Malcolm X. The cause of death was ruled to be the sawed-off shotgun.
Rally attendees seized one of the gunmen as he tried to escape the Audubon.
There is archival film of the scene outside the Audubon Ballroom right after the assassination.
Policemen engaged in a brutal tug-of-war.
You see a scuffle between the police and the crowd that was trying to beat down Talmadge Hayer, the only one of the assassins to confess. And there's a man standing on the edge of that crowd who looks a lot like William Bradley, who, according to Hayer, fired the shotgun that killed Malcolm. And he's feigning like he's part of the brawl. And in that kind of misdirection, he steps back, and then you see him walk across the frame very calmly, closing his coat, and he just walks away. This is how he got away. If William Bradley is the man who pulled off that shotgun and took the life of Malcolm X, and I can prove it, I want to confront him face to face.
That's Abdur-Rahman Muhammad, independent scholar, historian, journalist, and activist in the docu-series on Netflix, Who Killed Malcolm X. And Abdur-Rahman Muhammad is joining us right now. So $36 million has been awarded to these two men who served decades in prison. Muhammad Aziz, who is alive, and Khalil Islam, who died over 10 years ago. So he did not know, he was never vindicated in his lifetime to the public. And then you are describing who, in fact, did kill Malcolm X. Talk about your response to what has now taken place, and are the people involved, are any still alive?
To my knowledge, no. They are all deceased. There's really
including
no
J.
one.
Edgar Hoover.
including J. Edgar Hoover, and I tend to believe that that's the reason why we've been able to get this far in terms of whatever kind of justice we've been able to attain. It's because it's so far along in the history that most of these personalities are long since deceased.
And Abdur-Rahman Muhammad, clearly, Louis Farrakhan, the head of the Nation of Islam, is still around, and he famously, I think it was in 2000, in a 60 Minutes interview, claimed that he did not order the assassination of Malcolm, but he admitted that he created the climate in which the assassination took place. I'm wondering your sense of to what degree the actual perpetrators or intellectual authors of this crime were ever held to justice.
Well, let me set the record straight here. He did quite a bit more than that. I mean, he was at the mosque, number 25. The mosque that we documented was the epicenter of the murder plot against Malcolm X. He preached there that afternoon, the very afternoon that Malcolm was delivering or was set to deliver his talk at the Audubon Ballroom. So, what he knows and what we can prove that he knows, those are two different things. But he did quite a bit more than create the climate. He was, as we say, he was in the nest of the plot.
And were you ever able to confront him, Abdur-Rahman Muhammad?
Well, our producers reached out to him, and he declined to participate in the project in any way, viscerally so.
And what do you think is most important for the world to understand right now? Because clearly Malcolm X was a world leader. He was a human rights leader in what took place and the role of the FBI in this.
Well, we should understand that Malcolm's legacy it looms larger today than it did even in his own lifetime. Part of the reason why it has taken so much time to attain some measure of justice in this case is because at the time of his assassination, the general public essentially took the position of the government. His own people were after him, and they finally got him. Case closed. There weren't too many people identifying with these wrongly accused brothers. He was not treated in the same way as Dr. King was, and he was not accorded the same respect and acclaim, as I should say, that Dr. King was able to garner. And so his case just faded to black, but now his star looms large on the international stage, and he is regarded as an icon and a hero and a great revolutionary. And so for that reason, we learned that in the passage of time, the true measure of a man is revealed.
And we only have about a minute left, but this $36 million settlement comes on top of $20 million that New York State agreed to pay. Why was we can see the FBI, the federal government, the New York City police, but why? What was the culpability of the state in all of this?
So
was it? Thank you. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, sorry, Abdur-Rahman. Yeah, just to clarify that one. The total between the city and state is $36 million. So it was 26 from the city and 10 from the state that came previously. And the reason the state paid is because New York State is one of few states in the country that has a law that compensates people who are wrongfully convicted and imprisoned. And that's a major movement of my partners at the Innocence Project and other organizations to get similar laws passed in the rest of the country.